The philosophic orders related to rational thought. We live in a world where there is such a thing as a cause-effect relationship. This is an extremely important factor to keep in mind. We live and are able to continue living only because there is such a thing as reality. Reality is, and within the world of reality, there is a cause-effect relationship. That is to say, when a particular action is initiated, we can learn and ultimately predict the consequence of that act or a series of acts. If this were not true, we could not stay alive. It is absolutely vital that we understand enough about reality so that we can deal with it. Now, here is an important consideration to keep in mind. When we are thinking in terms of cause-effect, we often tend to think that a cause-effect hookup comes in what we might call isolated pairs. In other words, I would like to attain objective X, and I learn through observation and study and experience that A plus B plus C minus W produces X. And so I put that together just the way I should put it together, and I get X, and I say, hooray. That's how you do it, and X is the desirable good, and therefore I continue to do this. But what I may not have taken into account is that X, once it arrives, is in itself a cause for future effects down the road. These are other effects that I wasn't interested in, and probably I didn't even bother to think about them. I simply thought of reaching X by the least cost, the most efficient method, and so I know how to reach X, and what happens after that I'm not concerned with, but I should be. Because further down the road beyond X, there may be other factors now coming into existence because of the existence of X that will ultimately sweep around in a great arc and interfere with my ability to put A and B and C together, and I can't have X anymore. Whereas if I learned a better way of going at X, maybe I would learn how to increase the likelihood of A, B, and C being available, and I could continue to have X for a long time. You see, what we need to do is to learn how to be omniscient. And of course we can't. So there is something else that we have to have as a substitute. Now, incidentally, the development of the computer has helped us here, because we can feed into a computer all of the known data that we have in relation to any particular area, and then we can ask the computer to make mathematical computations relating to the law of probability, and the computer can do this so rapidly that it can, in only a few minutes' time, transcend years and years of careful mathematical work. And thus we can extend the laws of probability into the remote future to find out what is probable in terms of the data that have been fed into the computer. But man isn't a computer. We cannot do that type of mathematical work, and we don't always have a computer handy so that we can punch in the information and then activate it and ultimately get a feedback. But you know, there's an interesting thing. We don't necessarily need the computer. If we have done our homework correctly, then we would be able to detect principles. And a principle, which is the known characteristic of the behavior of certain things, singly or in combination. Once we know the principle, we don't have to do the mathematical prediction, because knowing the principle, we are guided on the basis of the characteristics of reality to get the right answer. And that's what we want to have. The important thing is to learn the principles by means of which we can predict not only the consequence of A plus B plus C minus W equals X, but we can learn the characteristics of A plus B plus C plus W and plus X, so that we don't have to multiply it out every time. We simply know on the basis of principle. This is what we want to do. Now, there are several philosophic orders that concern us here. And a philosophy, that's a big word, of course, but actually what it relates to is an overall view of things. All of us have philosophies of one sort or another. They are simply the composites of what we know and the way we think things ought to be, as well as the way we think things are. And we put these together, and we have a certain attitude that develops from this. In the world we live in, we could divide everything in the world into, say, these two philosophic orders. We would have what we could call the natural order, and then we would have the man-made order. Now, these are obviously different. The natural order would be what? Well, the natural order would be comprised of all of those things that nature has provided. That would be all of this earth and the resources of the earth, the air, the water, the soils, the minerals, the metals, the growing things, plant or animal, or of any other kind, even the kinds we don't know of, as long as they have been provided by nature. Well, that would be part of the natural order. Man himself, for instance, would be a part of the natural order. And then there's the man-made order. Now, what's that? The man-made order would be those things that exist in reality which men have brought into existence. And I'm not speaking here in terms of man's ability to procreate and to have children. That also is a natural and not a man-made process. What we are talking about here is those things that men make only because they have learned the principles respecting reality, and then they put the pieces of nature together in a way that nature doesn't do it, and we come up with new substances, new products, new gadgets, new devices, new tools, new comforts and conveniences. And all of these things, although they contain the elements of nature, are of the man-made order. Men make them. You can't go out and pick these off trees. They are put together with the human mind at work. But this is also a part of reality. So we have these two orders, the natural order and the man-made order. Of even greater importance to us, I would think, would be these orders, the order of the objective and the order of the subjective. Now, what are these? Well, the objective order would be that order that is concerned with reality itself. Another word that you could use in place of objective would be reality or fact. You could use also the word principle, because a principle is always related to the objective order if it is a principle in fact. Men do not invent principles. They discover them. The principle exists in the nature of things as they are. It relates to the basic, fundamental, natural characteristics of existing phenomena. So, principles, reality, fact, all of these things, and really it's the same thing, would be a part of the objective order. That is to say, it has existence in itself. It is. It doesn't make any difference whether you know that it exists or whether you don't. It exists independent of your knowledge, independent of your judgment, independent of your likes or dislikes. It simply is. An example of something that is objective, that we know exists, and yet very few of us have any actual direct contact with it, and that would be the other side of the moon. As you know, the moon circles the earth in such a way that we only see one side of it. The other side is hidden. But it's there. Is there anyone who would care to contend that the moon does not have another side? It'd be pretty hard to argue logically and conclusively to that effect, that although you only see the one face, that there isn't another side. Of course there's another side. Now, the fact that you haven't seen it doesn't take it out of existence. It's there. It is objective, it is real, but it is beyond your sense of awareness through anything you can bring to bear except your sense of logic. It's got to be there. If you've got an item that has one face, it must have an opposing face. Now, you may not know what's there on that face, but whatever is there, and that is a fact, whether you know it or not. The same would relate to items that are under the earth. For instance, if I were to dig down here, right where I'm standing, get right through the building and go right down into the ground and dig down for 20 feet, I would find something. What would I find? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's there now. I don't have to know what it is. I just know that something is there. Something has got to be there. It would be something relating to soils, rocks, minerals, metals, or something of this sort, because it would be of that genera. It would be a part of reality. It's there. I don't know what it is. I don't have to know what it is to know that it is. How do I really know that it is? Well, in one sense, I really don't know that it is, in the sense that I have any immediate input into my mind on it, because I really don't. I simply have a supposition that it has to be there, and the reason my supposition is a reliable supposition, even though a supposition, is that I know the nature of things. It's got to be there, because that's the nature of things as they are. And that's how we learn about objective reality. It is there because it has to be there. Thus, if I create a table, and I make the table out of wood, I can predict that the table will be in existence generally about as long as any piece of wood would be in existence relating to the type and kind of wood that I used. I would also predict that if I put a table into a given room and then walk off and leave it in the room, that it doesn't cease to exist, it simply remains in that room. Well, how do I know the minute I go through the door that it didn't disappear? Because I know the nature of wood. Wood doesn't disappear. It stays there unless some other factors that I don't know about are brought to bear on it. So this is how we survive in this world. We learn the nature of objective reality, we learn the principles respecting certain things, and then we can predict that it's pretty intelligent to make a table out of wood, because wood is relatively durable, it's easy to work with, and we can predict that if we put it in a room and leave it there overnight, we can come back and the same table will be there again, and we don't have to make it over again on the second day. We've got it to work with because we made it the day before. And this is how we learn to live in this world. We learn the nature of objective reality. But the learning process is a fascinating one, and this takes us to the other order, the subjective order. And this is a very tricky one. As a matter of fact, right now, we have persons who contend that there isn't any such thing as objectivity at all. They say it's all in the mind, because you never know anything until you know it, and obviously of course that's true, but then they say until you know it, it doesn't exist, as though the mind actually brought into existence the items of reality. Now, the mind is good, but it isn't that good. The mind doesn't create reality. It becomes aware of reality. Of course, reality would have to be there for it to become aware of anything. And so the mind is that sensitive instrument that we use to coalesce various inputs from various sense organs that we have, by means of which we learn that there is a real world and we learn how to deal with it. But now, there's a very important factor here. And this is where, you see, we have certain people today, for instance, who insist that although there may be such a thing as a subjective world, that anything that is subjective is in error. And they would contend that they themselves know objective fact. And I want to show you that is probably an improper approach to reality. You don't really ever get an objective fact into your mind. The only facts that you get are related to the objective world, but you obtain them subjectively. Let me make a little analogy here so that you understand what I'm talking about. Let me suppose that I have a camera, an extremely sensitive camera, and I bring it into this room, and we'll assume that it has a good lens and that the lighting is correct, and I have good sensitive film. I can aim this camera at the far side of the room and activate the shutter, and I will take into the camera an image of everything that is on the far side of the room. Assuming a good camera, a good lens, proper lighting, and so forth, I will have an extremely accurate image in my camera. And then it'll be on a negative plate. I can have it developed, and I've got a picture of the far side of the room. Fine. But that's all I can do. There is no way that I can pick up the far side of the room, which is reality, and put that reality into my camera. It won't fit. The only thing I can get into my camera is an image of the far side of the room. That's all I can do. That's all I can do with my brain. I cannot put you into my mind. By no possible process can I pick up reality and stow reality in my mind. All that I can get into my mind is an image of reality. And an image of reality is just not reality. It is an image only. And like any image, it lacks dimension. Like the mind, of course, has more dimensions than a flat surface in a camera, a negative plate. But nonetheless, it lacks dimension. I, for instance, might get to know you very well, but I never know your reality. All I ever know is my image of your reality, and it is lacking in dimension. There is no possible way that I can put into my mind the multidimensional creature that you are. No way. Just an image. That's all I get. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the image is wrong. Just as my camera could focus on the far end of the room and bring me an extremely accurate picture of everything that's there, it's only a picture. What is there is still there. I didn't get it into the camera. I can have an extremely accurate picture of you, but it's not you. It's only a picture. It's an image. And man is a creature of images. He is a creature of dreams. He deals in the subjective area with ideas, with visions, with dreams, with images. That's what he has to deal with. They can be accurate images. They can be inaccurate images, but whether they are accurate or inaccurate, they are images, and he has to deal with them that way. That's what we mean by the subjective order. The subjective order is the order of the mind. It is an order of imagery. Wipe out all human minds, and everything left will be in the objective order. The subjective order is that order of imagery created by men. Now, the important thing to understand here is that that is the way we deal with objectivity. Thus, no man ever knows what is objective in an objective sense. He knows what is objective in a subjective sense. We learn objectivity subjectively. And that means that every human being, irrespective of how much he knows, could learn more. There is no total point where we reach absolute saturation and maturation in the area of knowledge. That's not possible. The amount that we don't know will probably always exceed the amount that we know. It's a very humbling thought. You don't know anything in the total sense that knowing objectivity in your mind would bring you. Now, this does not mean that you are ignorant or stupid or dull or anything of the sort. On the contrary, you do have knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? Actually, knowledge is the word we apply, that we make use of, when we have found that the objective world is accurately portrayed subjectively. It is the combination of the two. Now, if you have an objective piece of reality out here, and you get an impression of it in your mind, and your impression is inaccurate, we don't call that knowledge. We say, well, that's a mistake. We say it's an opinion. Granted that you have an image of reality, but your image is wrong. This can be. People can have incorrect images. But people can also have correct images. And that is the point that has to be made. So many people imagine that if it is in an image, it has to be incorrect. No. Actually, man is rather good at forming accurate subjective impressions. They're still subjective, but they are accurate. As a matter of fact, human beings have a lot going for them. You know, we had to learn at a very early age that there is a profound objective difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a rosebush. And we managed it. We got that figured out a long time ago. And there was no argument about it. You couldn't make a mistake there and survive. You have to treat these things quite differently. And if you make a mistake, it'll probably be your last mistake. So human beings have very good equipment. We have very sensitive sensory perceptive organs. Very sensitive. We pick up subtleties in sound and color and light. We pick up subtleties of meaning and inference. We are very good at picking things up. We're very good at putting them out. But it's important that we classify them accurately if we are going to understand reality and deal with it. Now, obviously, there wouldn't be any point in having a camera if there weren't something to take a picture of. The reason cameras were invented is because that there's a real world out there that you can take pictures of. The reason we have brains, the reason we have a mind to use, relates to the fact that there's something out there that we are to get impressions of. The brain is simply an impression instrument. It deals at a lot of levels here. I've only mentioned one, actually. But there wouldn't be any point in the brain if there wasn't something in the objective order for the brain to try to understand. So the argument of the subjectivists that there is no objective order at all, it's all in the mind, is complete hooey, if you'll pardon that downgrading, because in point of fact, there wouldn't have been a mind. There would be no reason for it to exist if there wasn't something of an objective nature for the mind to grapple with and learn to comprehend. If it's just nothing out there, the mind would not know what to visualize to create anything. You wouldn't create anything. You would be totally disorganized, and the only thing in existence would be space. And your mind wouldn't even be in existence because that too would be space. So you forget it. The subjective position is not an accurate one. But likewise, the objective position, or the objectivist position, which tends to assume that subjectivity is always erroneous, that's not accurate either. The fact that we are dealing with images doesn't mean that we are wrong. It means that this is the method that we use in order to deal with reality. What is important is that we learn to deal with reality. The manner that we have to deal with reality relates to our subjectivity. Very well. Now, let's consider some of the functions of the brain, of the mind. The brain, of course, is the organ in the skull. consisting of several parts. We don't have to get into the physiology of it. But here are the functions of the mind, or some of them, the major ones that have to concern us here. First of all, the mind is an image receiver, just the way a sensitive plate in a camera would be a receiver. We pick up these images through our various sense organs. We get the image in our mind, and we focus on that image, and then we work with it, you see. So that is the image formation and the impression reception. This goes on in the mind. Now there is another factor in the mind. The mind also has fabulous memory banks. You talk about the memory banks of a computer. The human mind has a vast memory bank, or series of them. Psychiatrists, psychologists have contended, I don't know whether the point has been proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, but they have contended that in point of fact, everything that you have ever seen or experienced is really remembered somewhere in one of those memory banks that you have. And with the right stimuli, it could be brought to the surface again. And they demonstrate this repeatedly. Whether it is a total case or not, I couldn't argue. But certainly this is true in a large measure. It is certainly true that we are able to recall things that we've totally forgotten, seemingly, and yet the impression is there way back in the mind, and we recall it and then bring it to the fore again. Now, that's memory. This is one of the functions of the mind. We then not only take in images, but we store them away. We have a vast storehouse, many filing cabinets in which we put things. And of course, the manner in which we sort things out in our mental filing cabinets can be just as vital as the way we file letters in an office. If we don't file it correctly, we end up having a disorderly mind. And then we're confused, and we don't know how to bring forward those bits of information that we have carefully stored there. We just sort of fall on them helter-skelter, and then we seem to be disorganized. And you and I have met people like that who are disorganized in their memory banks. They just don't remember what they should, and they remember what they shouldn't. This goes on. Then there is another factor of the mind. The mind is also the instrument of desire, of want, of emotion. The things that we admire, the things that we like, we emotionalize in our minds. This is done in the mind. Then there is another factor in the mind. We evaluate. We give preference to various things. We like everything more or less. And this is an evaluation process in the mind. We infer, we value, we store up knowledge, we form images. We do all these things in the mind. The mind is a tremendous storehouse, a tremendous tool by means of which we deal with reality. The important thing for us to keep in mind is this. We have to live in a real world. The brain, the mind, is our basic tool for learning how to do it correctly so that we can initiate the proper causes that will take us to the effects we want, which effects themselves must be understood sufficiently so that they are not dysfunctional, and thus we can establish successful living, successful operation within a libertarian context, avoiding tyranny and slavery. And this is what we want to do. Thanks very much.